And I call the Honourable Member for Werriwa.
Due to my age and the longevity of my political involvement, I am indisputably the only person in this Parliament who was at the 1969 and 1972 victory functions at Gough Whitlam's home. And I want to correct an earlier contribution in regards to that, because the second 1972 event certainly was at his home. He had previously received the results at the Sunnybank Motel, room 7, and then walked to the function that night. In 2010, after the strange brief disappearance and then a revival of the seat of Reid, in a checkmate of political faction leaders and union honchos, I found myself as the member for Werriwa. I soon found two very distinct aspects of that electorate. The first is a sense of difference, a belief that the Macarthur region was distinct, and if you go to any fundraising in that electorate, they always promise people that all the money will stay in the region. That's a hangover from the rural nature of Campbelltown and its environs. But I also found that not only Labor loyalists, but also the general electorate had a belief that it was a great thing that they lived in the electorate of Gough Whitlam. Again in 2013, when the Liberal Party plastered the electorate with money, and pundits in both the Liberal Party and the Labor Party thought that I would lose the seat, I had newspaper commentary which constantly stressed that the iconic seat of Reid, the old seat of Gough Whitlam, would be lost to the Labor Party. So he's very much centrally involved in the history of that electorate. I had the opportunity of observing another aspect of his political life, as my father shared with him for significant periods state and federal responsibilities. And they went through the obvious requirements of that electorate, the fetes at the schools, the presence at balls and dances and other events of the burgeoning Maltese, Italian and German communities, the nascent RSLs and bowling clubs, and on many occasions he dropped by our house, took off his shoes and had a few drinks. My mother, being raised in the Riverina, was no mean cook, and on many occasions she commented on Gough's fondness for the tooth, with a proclivity for cakes, etc. Gough Whitlam, I want to stress, from the moment of the 1949 by-election, where I have an advertisement here provided by Richard James Ford for a meeting at Liverpool Town Hall on the 25th November, was a person who very much involved himself in the electorate. Locally educated children involved in sporting, swimming and other training, a person who actually treated very seriously his civic responsibilities and engagement with the local electorate. It's not only the matter of what he accomplished for this country, but the fact that he was very much a participant in local democracy within the electorate. And that was, as I say, the reason why we now see that there is such a fondness for him within that electorate. He, of course, is respected for many breathtaking innovations of the period. And I think that the important point to bear in mind is that these still affect us today. Both sides of politics have talked about the NDIS, and hopefully we'll now see action in regards to Australia's disabled. A person called Gough Whitlam was calling in the wilderness 40 years ago for a national compensation scheme. In the last few months, Australia has been very proud to make its opinions in regards to matters as diverse as ISIS and the shooting down of the plane in Ukraine, make its presence felt in the Security Council. The accomplishment of this is very much related to a person who, in contrast to many other Prime Ministers, knew that there were capital cities in this world beyond Washington, Wellington, Tokyo and London. He had an incredible knowledge of the world, its diversities, a belief that rather than being the arse end of the earth, this country, through its pioneering accomplishments, I guess through its remoteness, through its independent need to survive in the Second World War, etc., that it had something to present. And the fact that we can now see ourselves on the Security Council, that we can have a role independent to some degree of the United States, at least a degree greater than it was previously, owes much to him. In regards to university education, a matter of controversy these days, I want to quote some figures just to show how bad things are in the United States, where some people in this country would like us to emulate. Christopher Benfey in the New York Review of Books last week revealed that 100 United States schools with 0.3% of the United States education system were able to provide 22% of the entrance to Princeton, Yale and Harvard. This is the kind of outcome of policies that Gough Whitlam vigorously opposed. We know that he abolished university fees, he introduced student income support, he moved the federal sphere very strongly into tertiary education, and many other aspects of that policy. Another issue that is on the agenda today that has some connection with him, of course, is Gonski. One of the issues back in his political career was the question of state aid for schools. And I have a letter here from Brother Kelvin Canavan, who was a long-term activist in this issue. He talks about Whitlam at state aid and other rallies in 1969 and notes, his message is always the same. Australia must increase spending on education and both government and Catholic schools should be funded according to need. Gough had a very clear view that the Commonwealth must make, quote, a comprehensive and continuous financial commitment to schools as it does to universities. A few years ago, I located a sound recording of the town hall speeches. I sent a copy to Gough, who phoned me the next day with his reminiscences of the campaign by Catholics for financial assistance for their schools. He took considerable pride in the role he played in ensuring that all students had access to well-funded schools. On a number of occasions, he came back to the 1969 rallies. He lamented the passing of public meetings that provided a stage for a gifted orator. Television is a poor substitute for the town hall, he said. So what he's also recognising is another area where Whitlam's views are still relevant today. His belief that there needs to be an emphasis on areas of need for those regions that are deprived, so that people do have access to university and they do have access to an equal education in primary and secondary. And I've got to say, in my association with people, the most common, constant reference to Whitlam is in connection with education. The number of people who say that they personally would not have went to university, they personally would not have had the livelihood they gained, they would not have been able to bring up families in the fashion that they did, they would not have had the opportunity to broaden their knowledge without Whitlam's reforms in education, is the most evident of those changes. And finally, of course, and many people can raise a variety of aspects of it, we do have the recognition of China. It's interesting that in the last fortnight of Jimmy Carter, who only accomplished US recognition of China in '78, and in the process was vigorously attacked by Barry Goldwater. He was actually treated very badly by the Chinese last week in China, and thanks for that. But it's only, as I say, 6 years after Australia that the United States normalised responsibilities. It was a breathtaking initiative by an independent country, a country asserting its place in the world. And of course, finally, we have the situation of the war in Indochina, the decision by Labor to stop this lottery and to give people the opportunity to avoid involvement in this conflict, which had long been opposed, far more vigorously even than Gough, by other elements in the Labor Party over the previous decade. I salute Gough and Margaret's contribution to Australian political life and in the process their family, and express my own, my electorate and my family's condolences.